Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government. We're here to talk about Afghanistan. Last week, when we did the live stream talking about the fall of Kabul, I promised that I was going to bring some guests on who are actually experts on the field, who know what's going on, who have been involved both from a military, but also from a Department of Defense perspective, but also from a perspective of working as a civilian on the ground, being intimately involved in Afghanistan and the successes there, as well as the fall of Afghanistan and what that left behind, and what was being done to try to mitigate the damage. And so today I've got with us I've got Simone Ledeen, and Simone is a person who was a deputy assistant secretary of the Department of Defense in the Trump administration. She worked as a private individual in the field in Afghanistan, and spent considerable effort trying to make certain that people who were being left behind after the fall were able to get into the airport and be able to get out of Afghanistan with their families and not be killed or have their families killed as a result of their friendship with the United States. Simone, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Simone, we're looking back a year. This time a year ago, you were feverishly trying to help people get over the wire. Looking back a year, how do you feel thinking it's been a year, but there's so much pain, so much heartache? How do you kind of process the past year in terms of what you've seen happen?
Well, I feel terrible. I served in Afghanistan with the Defense Department as a civilian, but I served with the military, embedded with the military. And I still am in touch with, a lot of people I served with, a lot of Afghanistan vets that I've met since, and some of whom I met last year during the fall of Kabul and our attempts to help get people out. But I noticed then, and I notice now, a year later, there's a peak. There's an increase in mental health issues among a lot of them. I think the moral injury to our veterans has been grave and has resulted in, sort of even worse mental health outcomes for people. I was actually talking to a friend of mine who served multiple tours in Afghanistan last night, who told me he'd started having panic attacks again, and he's been home for like 5 years now. For a lot of us, it's not over. It hasn't stopped. We've been in touch with people over a year now, still trying to help them to get out, if not to the U.S., at least to a third country. These are people that we've committed to. We've looked them in the face and said, I will not forget about you. And, every day it seems like there are new people that pop up on email, on LinkedIn, on WhatsApp, asking for help, desperate, moving house to house. So it's not over.
So it's not over. What I know that some of the stories that I heard back a year ago were of people who had been interpreters, people who had literally had Americans basically living in their houses, working with them, just hand in glove, and they were being desperately trying to get to the airport. They were literally putting their lives and their families' lives in their hands, trying to get to the airport, taking all sorts of long, covert routes, crawling through ditches and everything else to get there. And yet for some reason, the Biden administration didn't seem to have any idea who should be let out and who should not be let out. It seemed like it was really haphazard what was your experience in trying to deal with the Biden administration to try to get people out? Were they? I mean, how did that work? You obviously spent a lot of time interacting, trying to help people.
Yeah. So I found there's a report that recently came out, I think 2 weeks ago, from the House minority side. They actually did an investigation, as thorough as it could be, considering the White House and State Department totally stonewalled and refused to provide any documents or answer any questions. That actually provided me with a lot of clarity, where I'm still trying to understand why things happened the way they did. It was at the time so chaotic, but there were so many things that happened that didn't make sense. Keep in mind, I was like thousands of other volunteers, I think, just in my living room on my phone using, encrypted telephone apps, communicating with people, some of whom were Afghans who were trying to get out, some of whom were U.S. service members that were on the ground there. And then people kind of in between. It was like a daisy chain of people. And there were many, many, many different daisy chains that actually were pretty, successful for a very short, discrete period of time. But my experience was, every day was a new, everyone go to this North Gate at, 3 p.m. Bring all your papers. Here's what you're going to need. And we would send everyone there. And then the gate would be closed. It wouldn't open. And then there would be, rumors of a threat, or everyone leave the area. The Taliban are about to, someone's about to explode himself at the gate. So there were so many false starts that way. Then there were also people who had been waiting at the Abbey Gate, which, everyone knows about. There had been a lot of people waiting at the Abbey Gate for days and days and days. We've been told, tell your Afghan allies to show up there, and they'll be let out at that time, or they'll be let in at that time. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Even with people who had a lot of documents with them, they had everything that was required. There was just such a huge mass of people, they couldn't get close enough. And then over a period of days, the weather was so hot. People were there with their families. Their family members were passing out from the heat. There was no water. And so some people gave up, and they went home and they said, we'll come back tomorrow. Well, I think those of us back in the US we didn't want to tell them, but I think we kind of knew, like, this is your chance. Either you stay there, you're not going to get out, and I don't even know if you're going to get out if you stay there. Right. So they were relying on us to tell them what to do, and we had no idea what to tell them. I'm sorry, my dog is really making noise to go out.
That's okay. I can't hear your dog, so it's all good. One of the things that I think is important for people to realize is that we had thousands of people who had been friends, who had been allies, who were there working with U.S. forces all over the country, and they came to Kabul because that's where they were told to come. The Taliban, they were given. We know about the $80 billion worth of equipment, but they were also given the technology and the knowledge to be able to use pretty sophisticated tools to determine who actually was somebody who was an insider with the U.S. Forces and who wasn't. And as a result, they had some pretty sophisticated tools available to try to identify people who were their enemies and who they were targeting to die. And so the life of the people who were there, Simone, I'm trying to get a sense if you were there and you're sitting there trying to get out, It wasn't just like hop in the car and drive down to the gate. What were people having to do to physically get from where they were staying and also move around and try to keep mobile? Where people weren't just staying at their house and saying, gee, I'll drive down to the airport today and see if I can get out. It was a pretty arduous journey, wasn't it?
For some of them, yes, it was. Just to address your first point, the Taliban, there were some members of the Afghan security forces who saw the writing on the wall and switched sides and joined up with the Taliban. And so they had access to things that we had given them, we had trained them on, including biometrics data, which was, fingerprint scans or iris scans of the Afghans who had worked with us. And that fell into the hands of the Taliban pretty early on while we were still evacuating people. And so it was a very scary, very dangerous situation for them, not only Afghans who worked with us, but also sort of the higher end fighters, the Afghan special forces, many of whom actually had come here to the US to train, who had specialized skills. So, but yes, I only know the stories of the people that I interacted with, but I can tell you there's one family, happily, this is a happy ending. They're not too many, but this was one. The father, the husband, had actually gotten blown up in previous service and was a double amputee. He didn't have any legs. He had prosthetic legs. And I found out later, I had the opportunity to meet him, which several months ago, which was sort of emotionally overwhelming for me in a good way. I can't imagine, they're just happy to be here, he and his family, but he had traveled to the US after his injury to Texas, and he had gotten prosthetic limbs, 2 prosthetic legs. They had fitted them for him. He had learned how to use them and how to walk on them. And actually, it's so beautiful. The people who built these prosthetics for him had actually put in the cushion. If you pull up the kind of front top cushion, they put the American flag inside. So he had that in his prosthetics with him. So imagine what would have happened to him if the Taliban had seen those. So he actually, the story that, as I understand it, that he told is that he sold his car to get enough money to go to Kabul. They were in their home village, and he walked with his wife and children for days to get to Kabul. I don't know how many days, like 3 days, 5 days, unimaginable. But it just shows you the level of desperation that they felt. So they finally made it to the Abbey Gate, and they were not able, just with the push of people there, they were not able to get up front to the gate. So we had troopers on the inside that were looking for him and his family, but they just couldn't see them because it was just a sea of people as they were looking down from the wall. So his handler told him, take off one of your legs and lift it up in the air. And that's how they'll be able to identify you. And I'm getting chills as I'm telling you this story right now, but that's exactly what happened. He took off one of his prosthetics, his prosthetic limbs and legs, and he waved it in the air. And that was how they were able to identify him. And they brought him up to the gate and inside the airport. And so he and his family thankfully made it out. And they are living here in the US now.
Let me ask you, that's a phenomenal, brings tears to your eyes. It's a kind of story. And I think people need to understand that this was, this essentially were private individuals who were working with people who were inside Afghanistan, who they knew, trying to give them a clue how they could get out. and then communicating with government people inside the wire, saying, hey, here's somebody who we can vouch for. They've got papers. See if you can get them in. And it was a real battle to try to get the attention, so the guards who were standing there would know who to look for to be able to bring in, because the throng that wanted to get out exceeded the ability to actually vet them. And so there's a vetting process that occurred, and people who worked with people who should have gotten out were desperately trying to use every resource they could to get the word inside the wire. Said, hey, these are the people who need to be gotten out. And it's really and nobody was paying people like Simone to do this. This was Simone and people like her just killing themselves because out of an honorable need to keep a promise to people, to not leave people behind based on an arbitrary deadline and a decision to basically let Kabul fall before you got the people out, which was a bad political decision out of the White House. Simone, we still have people in Afghanistan. We still have people. We know the House GOP came out with, I think it was 84 American citizens still in Afghanistan who we haven't gotten out. We have, a lot of people who they're dead if they're found by the Taliban, who are Afghan citizens as well. Is there a continuing effort to try to help people get out?
Yes, there is. So if you don't mind,
don't talk about anything you can't talk about. But
no. So first of all, I feel like I'm here today speaking on behalf of all the people who can't speak because they still have their hands tied by the government. Either they're still in the military, or they still work for the government, or they're government contractors and they're afraid they'll lose their contract if they speak out. That's very, very real. I know a lot of people who took leave during that time because they were given a direct order: do not do, stand down, do not do this. And there are some service members who have since retired and have come out and started talking about this. But there are so many more who are still sort of, their hands are tied and they can't speak. So was I killing myself? No, I didn't sleep for a couple of weeks, but I was in the living room of my house, on my phone. I wasn't killing myself. Afghanistan, for all of us who have served there, and had the honor of working with some of the most giving, incredible people that we've ever met in our lives. My first tour was in 2005, and I don't want to go into all the details of that, but I worked with some incredibly brave Afghan leaders who, by the time of our withdrawal last year, had all long since been killed. So personally, I didn't have people that I had worked with that I knew that were still there. I mean, they were all dead. And that was something that I was already, you struggle with that anyway. But this was something I wanted to help. Both of my brothers served in the Marine Corps. One served in Iraq, one served in Afghanistan. And I just, this is the right thing for us to do. This is who we are as Americans. Even if our government is betraying us in this way, it doesn't change the true nature of who we are. And that's still going to shine through and hopefully provide an example and provide a message. So, yeah, I mean, I think I know that there are still thousands, tens of thousands of people, according to that congressional report, who are still there. And I don't want to put anyone in any more danger than they're in, but I'll just say there are ongoing efforts, and there are groups that were formed a year ago, these kind of loose knit groups like the one that I was in that are really formalized now and have been desperate for donations for the last year, because those donations are funding safe houses where people have to move. They have to move all the time. Food, fuel for moving them.
So to put it in a historical perspective, almost like an Underground Railroad situation for people, and whereas in the 1850s, 1840s, I guess 1850s primarily, the Quaker Church was the essence of the Underground Railroad here in America. There's no equivalency in Afghanistan. And so there has to be dollars to be able to make this thing work, keep the communications capacities and the like. And because truthfully, if you're going to move somebody across a border, you need to be able to know, when it's safe to move across the border. You need to have it costs money. You have to pay for supplies. This is Afghanistan right now. There's a report that came out last week. A year ago, Afghanistan was 50% of the population was below the poverty level. The report that came out last week indicated that in 1 year, we now have about 95% of the people below the poverty level. So a country has been totally impoverished because of the Taliban takeover and destruction of their economies. They also suffered an earthquake that was devastating in country, and so so they're dealing with a base poverty in country. Do you know an email address or anything, or a URL that I can give people to, if they're interested in finding out more about how to support individuals are attempting to help people get out?
Yes, the two that I am really familiar with, I know the people inside. Number one is No One Left Behind. One of the board members is a former colleague of mine. They're doing
is that .org or .com? Do you know?
.org. Okay.
And I'll send out a follow-up email to people letting them know these names. Is there another one you want me to give, or do you want to focus on that one?
Yeah, I mean that's that.
Okay, we'll do that one. That's a good one. That's Simone Ledeen approved. NoOneLeftBehind.org. Somebody who you used to work for is running it, and and they're doing great work trying to get people out, need help. I wanted to one last question on Afghanistan, and I spent a lot of time last week talking about this and trying to encourage people who fought, who lost loved ones, who lost limbs, who suffered from PTSD, TBD, from all sorts of ailments as a result of having fought in Afghanistan, who, quite honestly, the lack of recognition for the sacrifice that they made was kind of startling, and a lot of people went through pretty difficult times as a result of the end a year ago. My point was this: a generation of Afghans experienced freedom. A generation of Afghans got an education. Afghan women voted. They got a sense of, by the way, one person, one vote. Kind of a strange concept. And so while the position they're in now is desperate and it's sad, the truth is the 20 years were not in vain, because people got to experience something that they otherwise would have been denied. And that's because of the sacrifice made by U.S. military and U.S. and others in the United States to try to bring freedom to Afghanistan. And that was kind of my message of kind of purpose, that this wasn't just a waste, because if a person gets freedom, even for a brief glimmer, a generation of Afghans got freedom, that they wouldn't have otherwise had. And so it's And so that's kind of been the way I've been trying to talk to people who served and might be questioning right now. Um, I've struggled since then. I saw things I never thought I'd see in my life. This has been, and now was it all for no? Was all a waste? You've been on both sides of that, so you've been on both sides. How do you deal with the sense that there's of purpose? Was it all just a waste of time?
This is a physically painful question to answer for me and probably for a lot of my fellow veterans. I find a lot of well-meaning people's kind of attempts to make things sound better a little. It just feels empty to me. With respect, I feel that. So you asked me how I feel.
Yeah, I'm trying to get. This isn't a couch,
yeah.
But I want to get
No. I mean, I think the question, what was it for, is a valid question to ask. And by the way, I served in Iraq too. I lost a lot of friends. A lot of really, really good people are not here anymore because they believed in what they were doing. We have an all volunteer military. And by the way, it's not just the military, it's our intelligence community. And we had a lot of law enforcement out there as well, serving. Many DEA lost a large number of people over there. So I think it's important to note all of that and to recognize. For me, I'm really angry. I'm really, really angry. And I'm sad and I'm still mourning and all that, but I'm so angry. And I demand accountability. And I think if people really, feel for veterans and feel sorry about what happened, help us get accountability. That's what we need. I think nobody resigned. Nobody admitted fault in any of this. Everything. What did the Secretary of Defense say? Everything was done perfectly. This was an excellent operation. BS, excuse me. But look at that congressional report. The U.S. government, led by the State Department, because they were the lead in this NEO, they had no intention of getting any Afghans out, and they lied about it all the way through. And that's unacceptable. We made promises that because we believed what our government was telling us. We made promises to Afghans, to our partners, based on lies, and we demand accountability. And so for me, that's where I'm focused. I hope the new Congress, when they come in, they do hearings, they present publicly all the information that is available, they can find and declassify on exactly what happened and what decisions were made when, because I guarantee you there are generals who ordered that gates not be allowed to open. I guarantee you there were senior commanders who would not let planes fly into certain places. And all of that has been covered up, and it's a disgrace, and it all needs to come out, or else you've lost this entire generation of people who stood up and raised their hands after 9/11.
Yeah, I have to tell you, it's, when we've gone through, experienced so many challenges with Congress being relatively inept when dealing with a Democrat administration and attempting to get them to be held accountable for anything. I think the main thing on accountability is not just being a YouTube hero. It's actually getting to the bottom. So some people have to retire early. Maybe some people lose a star. Some people lose, get busted down a rank or two as they retire, because it is because quite honestly, the only thing that this saved this from being the second most shameful event in our history has been the fact that the media doesn't care. And if the media cared about this, and if it were a Republican administration this happened under, the Republican administration would have been, this would have been impeachment for Republican administration. And that's just, I think just true. We've got a couple of questions, and I'm going to, let me ask you first of all, I'll go to a couple of questions in a second. And we're only going to do another 7 minutes of this. Okay. I appreciate all the time that you've given us on it. But let me ask quickly before I do a question. Abraham Accords. It's in the news right now. We have Iraq, the Biden administration, basically giving away everything they can to the Iranian government to try to get a signed deal that doesn't have the effect of actually making it so they aren't nuclear, and has no effect except for the ability to say, gee, we brought peace to the world, when in fact they made the world more dangerous. We have a lot of concern in the Arab world that a deal with Iran increases the Persian influence in the area, and essentially creates more money for terrorist organizations like the Houthis in Yemen. Abraham Accords was set up to kind of create an alternative defense network, so to speak, in the Arab world, in conjunction with the Israelis. Tell us what's happening with the Abraham Accord. Is it holding up? And I would argue that it's basically one of the biggest Trump legacies that exists, because it's, even the Biden administration has had to admit that it's actually a good thing now after they've spent a year and a half undermining it. But you tell me, you were involved in a lot of that. I know like a thimble's worth, and an ocean's worth. So tell me a little bit about Abraham Accord, why it matters, and what the attacks are on it today.
Well, at a strategic level, the Abraham Accords were historic. Obviously, Arab Muslim nations, for the first time, recognizing the state of Israel, making peace, establishing formal diplomatic relations, establishing deep economic ties, just extraordinary. And but at a strategic level, what's the reason, in my opinion, why all of that is extraordinarily important. But what's even more spectacular is, the John Kerry's and Joe Biden's and all of the great Democrat foreign policy experts have said since the beginning of time, because they're all about that old. They've said since the beginning of time, like, you can't have peace in the Middle East without the Israel-Palestine issue being resolved. That's the seminal issue that needs to be resolved. Without it, there's no peace. Okay, that's not true. That's clearly fake. That's fake news. And that's, to me, really what was extraordinary. They were wrong. And we showed they were wrong. The region showed they were wrong. And in fact, for a long time, quietly, the Gulf states had been saying, the Palestinians, they didn't want continuous war. The Gulf states didn't want continuous war in the region. They want peace. They want stability. They want economic prosperity. And they just, after a while, they said, you know what, Abbas, the Palestinians, they're not serious. They're never going to accept anything except for no Israel. And that's not realistic. Israel's here to stay. So we're going to recognize Israel. And that's what happened. Really sort of tragically, the Biden administration, hasn't been able to get away from its old view of the world, which it has proven to be that is not reality. But in many instances, including with this Iran deal, they refuse to accept reality and continue to live in a world of their own design, an imaginary world. And so, yes, of course, they've acknowledged the Abraham Accords are good, but at the same time, with their negotiations with Iran, with the allowing Iran to get access to funds that they did not have access to under the Trump administration, like Iran is back, and they're really dangerous, and the Gulf states have had to make peace with Iran because they have no choice. I mean, if you've ever traveled to UAE, for example, you can see Iran. It's right there. So they're living in the real world. And so last week, they sent an ambassador over. They've reestablished formal diplomatic relations with Iran because they have to. They have no choice. And we've put them in that situation. The Biden administration has.
I'm going to say something that you don't have to comment on. Okay. It seems to me pretty clear that the reason that the Biden administration and the various foreign policy experts, I'll call them, in the Biden administration are clinging to an Iran deal, a nation state that has declared that if they get nuclear weapons, they're going to, job one is to wipe Israel off the map. Want to continue to do deals with the Palestinian leadership, a leadership that continues to train children in their elementary schools going and blowing themselves up at a cafe in Tel Aviv is an honorable thing, and continues to pay families money when their kids do that, or when their fathers or mothers do that. That it's really hard to sit there and say there's a deal goes through the Palestinian, whatever it is, government, when that government's base belief is that Israel doesn't have a right to exist. And so you have to believe that they know this, that they're not ignorant. And since they continue to cling to that theory, it must mean to me that they agree with the basic premise that Israel as an entity doesn't have a right to exist. Otherwise, they wouldn't continue clinging to a solution that the only way you get to no war is to have no Israel. I mean, you don't have to comment, but that's logical. That's a logical thing. We haven't heard the mullahs in Tehran say, gee, we're going to make peace with Israel, and blah, blah, blah. No. They still cling to we're gonna blow Israel off the map as soon as we have a nuclear weapon, and to do deals and give money to people who have that as a perspective. You either have to be agreeing with those people, or you have to be incredibly naive. And I don't think these people are naive. So I'll just leave it at that. You don't have to comment on it, but I'm just going to say these are not naive people. They know what they're doing. And there's a school of thought that's permeating our universities and through the left, that Israel is an evil state, that they're an apartheid state, and that they have no right to exist and should just all go away. And it's a denial of history. It's a denial of everything we know about Middle East, and it is and quite honestly, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. And so, in the United States, by stepping back from our role, there has created an environment, and by essentially switching sides, has created an environment that's dangerous for the world, and quite honestly tells every one of our allies around the world is, guess what, dude? We might be friends now, but if somebody else gets elected, who knows what's going to happen? And you cannot run a country where alliances are based on 4-year elections. So it's a dangerous situation. And the Abraham Accords is the thing left behind that actually binds states together in the Middle East that have a common interest of survival and a common interest in peace, and takes the power away from those who seek the destruction of Israel as a condition of peace. So the Trump administration, of which you were part of, was brilliant in rethinking, looking at a new way of looking at the Middle East, and not just doing the same old thing. And for all those people who said, Donald Trump doesn't have any foreign policy experience, blah, blah, blah. The people who are working for him, working for him and for this country, said, we can come up with a new way of doing things that actually has a chance of working. And I admire that a great deal. And I thank you. I know you played a real role, behind the scenes role, in terms of making the Abraham Accords occur. And I wanted to just personally thank you for having the guts and the smarts to push something like this through that changes the dynamic and essentially creates an environment where the Middle East is not U.S. dependent in order to be free and have some self-sufficiency. So with that, I just wanted to say that. People don't know, but you did have a big role in that. And, it's like in all these things, Deputy Assistant Secretary is a high-ranking role, but it's not high enough ranking role that you get your name on anything. But all the work that you do, people out there, I want you to know, this person I'm talking to has made a tremendous difference of whether or not we're going to have a Middle East that's in flames, or if we're going to have a Middle East that has a chance of peace. And so, Simone, thank you for that. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say it. Is there anything people should know? Jared Kushner's got a book coming out. I guess it came out today. We got a bunch of stuff going on. Is there anything people should be looking at in the Middle East to kind of give them a sense of how things are going, or something that might set alarm bells off for them? And then I'm going to ask a couple of questions and we'll get out.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading the book. I know there have already been a few books out about the Abraham Accords and about, that period of time where we were all working in the administration. So it'll be interesting to read Jared's version of events and hopefully learn some new things. I certainly was the honor of my life to serve in the Trump administration and work on these matters of huge significance. Very, very proud myself as a Jewish American, a proud Zionist Jewish American, to help serve the U.S. interests and bring peace to the Middle East. Unfortunately, not lasting as yet, but I think the path has been set, as you said. I would have liked to see. I think we could have played a more integral leadership role the last few years in a lot of these deals that are coming out between the Gulf states and Israel. But I don't think it doesn't preclude us from being able to do that later. I think we can still be a big part and play a significant role going forward. I think it will be commercially, economically, not militarily, which is appropriate. Right. People.
Well, that's the interesting part.
Yeah.
There's an economic interest here. Israel has an economic interest. They now have a natural gas field. They have a lot of technology. They have a lot of people. Real dynamic economy. You have Saudi Arabia, which is looking to modernize right now, and of course we saw a president who was seeking, really declared virtual war on the leadership of Saudi Arabia, having to fist bump him while he went down over there trying to beg for oil that we could get from our own ground. But nonetheless, it's we see Saudi Arabia allowing they allowed flights that happened during the Trump administration, overflights from Israel to UAE. I think it's just none of this is happening without Saudi Arabia's agreement. The challenge is obviously with Mecca and Medina in Saudi Arabia. They have, you assume everything's the same, but the fact is the House of Saud has a balancing act they have to play. with their own internal constituencies, and the actions they've taken in allowing the Abraham Accords to occur shows extraordinary courage. How is that an accurate way of looking at it, or how do you look at Saudi Arabia? And then I'm gonna just sign off, because honestly, I can talk to you forever.
I think Saudi Arabia is really, I think it is significant. It's moving slowly. I do believe that soon there will be a normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia will recognize Israel and will formalize relations with it. It's a process. And for the reasons that you outlined, Mecca and Medina are both in Saudi Arabia. The kingdom is ruled by the same person who's responsible for Mecca and Medina. And so it's a process, but there have been so many small but significant moves. Even this week was the first flight over Saudi Arabia, transiting Saudi Arabia between Israel and another country. I think it was Maldives, perhaps. And so, it seems like every week there's another little push. And so I think the question is when. I think it could have been, I think if the election had gone a different way, I think that perhaps the Saudis would have already announced normalization. But as you noted, the relationship with the Biden administration has been, to put it mildly, very rocky. And as you noted, Biden went there to request that they drill more oil. Instead, they deferred to OPEC Plus. And today, OPEC Plus said possibly they were going to reduce the amount of oil output. So there you go. As you noted, we have everything we need here in the U.S., but we've shut everything down. So there you have it. It's an unfortunate series of events that have happened, and the next few years are going to be really bumpy. I hope our new Congress, when they take over, are aggressive from day one. That's what we need now. And I think a lot of things are possible. Our partners are waiting for us. They want us to succeed. They want a strong United States. And so I think we can unify over a number of different topics and hopefully start a new era in the United States after this unfortunate period.
Yeah, it's Simone, I appreciate the time you've spent, and I've learned a lot. I think, and hopefully people have been watching and who will watch will learn a lot about where we are and hopefully where we're going. Is there any way, if somebody wanted to, do you have a website or anything where somebody could hook in, or if somebody has any questions, I could have them just send me an email and have them do it here. Is there any way somebody can reach you?
I don't have a public facing email, but I do have a public account on LinkedIn, just Simone Ledeen. So people can message me through there, or they can write to you and you can send to me. But
so if you're on LinkedIn,
that's what I have.
Yeah. So so if you're on LinkedIn.com, Simone Ledeen, you can message her, or you can send an email to media@getliberty.org, and we'll get the email to Simone. Once again, the organization, if you want to help people who have been left behind, the organization to reach out to is NoOneLeftBehind.org. NoOneLeftBehind.org. This is a group who are working to help people who did not get out of Afghanistan, who were allies of the United States, whose lives they've lived lives of on the run from a Taliban that wants to kill them and kill their families. And it's being run by people who made promises, Americans who made promises to allies in Afghanistan that that we would not leave them behind. And these private individuals are seeking every day to keep those promises. And so because as Simone said, that's who we are as Americans. We're promise keepers. We're not promise breakers. And truthfully, our credibility around the world depends upon our keeping promises. So these private citizens are keeping those promises they made, even though the Biden administration is not all that interested in any promises from the past. So once again, it's nooneleftbehind.org. And Simone certifies that the people who are running this, so it's a legit group. You hear about a lot of groups that are just scamming. This is a legit group. They're really spending money. They're really working to get people out. So if you have, if this kind of touches your heart and you want to provide assistance, go to nooneleftbehind.org and check them out. And with that, I appreciate the time. Most of the comments are quite honestly just Biden bad, Trump good. We wish Trump were in, and sometimes calling Biden really bad names. So it's but that's to be understood. With that, Simone, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. And folks, we're going to do I'm going to try to have one more show on Afghanistan. And the question which I forgot to ask Simone was about the guards that died on the 26th. I guess 29th. I'm sorry. Is it 26th? I think it's 26th. And about the guards that died. But I'm endeavoring to get a mother of one of those guards who died to come on and talk a little bit about it, and perhaps the mayor of the town that she's from to talk about how the community came together to support the family and to support all those who were lost in Afghanistan. So with that, we'll say goodbye for now. I'm hoping to get that interview in the next day or two. So stay tuned, pay attention. We'll put out the notification as soon as we have it. And with that, thank you very much, Simone. This is Rick Manning, Americans for Limited Government, signing off until next time.